Hey everybody, welcome to Houdini Hangout on Thursday, the 27th of January. My name's Peter. Thanks for joining me tonight. If you joined me on Tuesday, you'll know that I had some unfortunate network issues, but I'm hopefully going to not be dealing with those tonight. Got some new networking equipment in and ready to kind of go back to work on this process. Going to start the whole thing kind of over from scratch a little bit here, just so if you're following along, or you want to follow along in the future, you can do so and not have to jump between videos and stuff like that. So I'm sure the recording from Tuesday is up online still, but I'm just going to kind of start us fresh and new here. So yeah, if you come on by at any, if you join us tonight and you just want to drop something in chat, something that you're thinking about or working on, or something comment that you have about what we're doing, working on tonight, please feel free to at any point to just comment or give your 2 cents. In no way am I the definitive expert on any of this stuff. I just really enjoy Houdini and hoping to be able to share that with everybody and kind of share the love that I have for this program with everybody else. So yeah. So anyways, let's dive into Houdini and get going. So what I had done on Tuesday was kind of starting with more the idea of, hey, I want to do this so that if you want to be super flexible with it in the future and all that kind of stuff, you can have a lot more, ability to like change the grounds out and things like that. But in this case, I don't think I'm going to worry so much about that, just because I think it's cooler to kind of get right to the actual particles and simulation and stuff like that, rather than messing around with how does the ground work and doing booleans and things like that from it. So the first thing I need is just some geometry. And I think instead of splitting this all up into multiple geometry nodes, I think I'm just going to do it mostly in one. Just because you can pretty easily get, there's not really a ton of elements that are going to be coming in here. There's just going to be one piece of geometry or one, character that's moving around in here. So let me go save this as real quick. Snow V2. And let's go. All right, so let's drop down a geo node here. We're gonna call this snow effect, and I'll actually give this little sim tag at the beginning of it here. And let's dive inside of that. I'm just gonna give myself just a little more room to work with here. So let's get Craig here. He'll be a good piece of geometry for us to work with. He's obviously set up on the ground plane as is, and let me just click this so we don't have him running by too fast. If you haven't seen the Craig test geometry before, it's a nice piece of animated, character work that you can just use to kind of mess around with. I believe he has actually 2 different groups, or at least you could get kind of split it out with this name attribute possibly. So you could, let's see here. If we look at his primitives, we can see there's different, these are all packed geometries. So we've got different names on here that we could pull out. If we wanted to just select his hammer, we could just put down a blast node and go to, it'll bring all these name elements up here, and we can just select hammer if we wanted to, and just say delete non-selected. And now just like that, we've got just his hammer. Obviously we're not going to want that in this case, but it's a nice piece of geometry. Obviously they set you up pretty well by default from side effects. So so we've got Craig here. He, like I said, is all packed geometry. And I am just going to say we don't need a shader for him, I don't really think. We can just use him as is. Another couple interesting things here is it looks like he has a rest pose as well that we could set him up with if we were, doing some, KinEffects work or whatever, some sort of, rigging type situation. But we're good with him as is. I'm just going to put a null down here just so I know kind of what's going on in my network. And I'm just going to say in, character geo. And I'm going to set that as just like a red in point to my network here. So I know what I'm, looking at. And then from here, I'm going to, we know we're going to use the ground plane for our main particles. So what I'm going to do instead is just do a box, just a simple box to set up where our snow is going to live. And I'm going to put the display flag on that. I'm actually going to just template Crag just with my little pink flag here. And under my box, I'm going to put down a transform node, just like that. And the reason I'm putting this down is because while I could very easily go into my box and set my attributes up and put some, put some expressions in here to be able to make it, at the ground plane or things like that. Whenever you install QLib up here, or I believe it's QLib or AElib, one of the two of them, you get a couple nice little presets here in your transform node, and you can just really simply just say place this on the origin plane. And now no matter what I do to this box here, I'll hit escape and enter just to bring up my display flag here. I could raise this up if I wanted to just to get it a little bit closer to it. But now anything I do is going to live right on that ground plane. So even if I grabbed this and moved it like that, it's always going to be living right, with its minimum value, minimum part of that geometry right on the ground plane. So it's really kind of a nice, quick way to do that. So we'll just give them some snow here on the ground. Pull this back a little bit so that this hammer starts in it as well. Pull this. I'm holding shift when I do that so that I can get both sides of the geometry to come out like that. I'm going to go a little bit further than I need to, just so we've got extra snow here, and I'll show you a little trick that I was doing. All right, and the other thing I want to do is, obviously, if I go all the way down to the end here, we don't have his end of his, his entire motion here. So I think it was like, I want to say it was like 336 possibly, if I'm remembering correctly. Let's see how far this simulation goes. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yep, because he brings his hammer down, he's going to bring it back. So let's pull this out as well. Just give him a little extra room there. Great, looks good. So actually messing around with the geometry of Crag gave me an idea just now for kind of isolating some of these particles when we get to that step, because we you don't need to sim this whole thing of particles, obviously. When we get to our snow simulation, we don't need to have particles that go all the way to the edge there, because they're not going to end up hitting, we're not going to end up seeing Crag interact with those out there. They're really just going to be unnecessary. So so what I'm going to do first, let's move this over here, because we're going to use, that's going to be kind of our main chain. So I'm just going to put another null here and call this in snow geo. Kind of the neat thing you could always do with this too, like if you were making some sort of a whole network of stuff and you wanted to make a digital asset out of it, this is always a nice way to kind of know like at what point you would want to have start points for your for your inputs on your your HDA node that you might create. So sometimes this is a good thing to do, just so like, oh, okay, here comes this will be where my snow would come into this system. Here's where my character would come into the system, or whatever you wanted to name those different things. So yeah, so just gonna kind of see how deep. That's probably pretty good there. So we've got this set up and we've got our snow geo. So let's go under our Vellum tab menu here, and what we want to do is do a vellum configure grain. So I'll grab that and put that in there. And so now this is going to be where we're going to kind of source our grain from, which will end up being, will be our snow basically. So, sorry, I'm just going to adjust my microphone real quick here. I feel a little extra slouchy for some reason today. There we go. Feels a little better. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use this create points from volume. When I click on that, that is going to now use the volume of this object to create points from, and the particle size is going to drive how many points we end up in there. So 0.0 or 0.1 is obviously too little. So let's just cut that in half to 0.05 and see where we get. All right, we've only got like a couple layers there. It's not really very much. So maybe 0.25. Cut it in half again and see where that gets us. Yeah, that's getting pretty, it's getting a little closer to what we want. Maybe we'll just do 0.2, just a slight. Yep, that'll be a good starting point. We got 1.2 million particles in the whole system. And obviously these nodes, if you haven't used the vellum stuff before, they create these three different kind of pathways through the SOP network, and that's in the geometry, the constraints, and the collisions. Here you can hover over those and see those at the bottom there changing. And so this is kind of a nice way to kind of separate out each of those different parts of your simulation or different elements of it. So what we're going to end up doing here is connecting all three of these down, any number of vellum, nodes that we might have connected, they'll all be connected, all three right in a row like that. So, the one other thing I think we want to, let's just look at these physical attributes here too. So you can see that you can set the mass of your particles, things like friction and all these different, properties you can set in here. And these are just scaling values. I don't believe they're actually setting the value particularly like, I want the friction to be this number. It's a scale of what will actually be in your sim. So like for example here, if you hover over this, it says it acts as a multiplier on the friction parameter. So I believe all of these are just multipliers towards what's going to happen in the actual solver. So that's one thing to keep in note. And I'm going to dither the surface of this, and that's just going to break it up, give it a bit more of a natural look. It's not going to be so smooth across the top. It'll look just a little bit more maybe natural. If you want it to be that perfectly smooth, maybe undisturbed snow look, you could do just a flat sheet like that and let it be. It's kind of up to you, obviously, but in this case, I'm going to do it. I'm going to have it dithered just so it starts a little bit random. And if you get too many points here and it's giving you a hard time tumbling around in here, you could always, I think if you check these off, you will get some speed improvements. Like with just points, you should have a huge improvement in how your tumbling speed is. Mine is okay with it being a sphere, so I'll leave it like that just so it's a little easier to look at, but just something to keep in mind as well. And if you wanted to play with something like your jitter scale here, these will, you can obviously see this takes a little bit longer to calculate, but these will actually, push them apart and do some different things like that to your grains and things of that nature. So, so now you can see here, this is like a really, this is all, moved around and all that kind of stuff. So that's obviously a pretty random distribution of it as well. You're not seeing maybe quite as much order to it, which can be a nice thing to use as well, but that calculation step is definitely a little bit of a hit. So in this case where we really don't care about the edges being, whatever, perfectly, flat and straight, you could turn that off or turn that on. Again, it's all, what you're looking for in the effect, but I think this will give us a good place to start. So we've got Crag right there. He's walking through this and he slams his hammer down. I want to give a little room so that, whatever happens with the hammer here, we'll be able to kind of, go off in this direction, because obviously he's giving it a lot of force in that direction. So, all right, so let's grab the vellum solver here. And what I can do is just hover over the dots at the bottom of the node and click on it, and it'll connect all of them together, just like that. And now we've got a nice, now we've got this kind of pathway going with all those things connected, and we've got our Vellum solver here. So the solver is pretty similar to anything you might find if you just did a straight up DOP simulation without, or like a DOP network without using these like SOP level tools. Inside of this node is actually a DOP network, a dynamics network that you could go inside of. But the really nice thing here is that you don't have to be jumping in and out of different contexts and all these different, types of nodes and stuff like that. It kind of packages it all in a really nice, kind of clean way. So what we're going to be using here is we're going to be using this to help kind of, this will obviously be the main part of our simulation. This will be driving all of our calculations and stuff. And what we're going to do first is kind of do just like a quick little what they call a quasi-static simulation, just to kind of let everything settle down and just, kind of come to rest. I found that worked really well with the system that I had before. Now, maybe if you were jittering all those points like that and packing them in really tight together, there might not be as much settling. But again, you get that huge hit up front for the calculation time. So it's kind of something to kind of pick and choose which makes more sense to you. But I'm just going to give this a little bit of extra cache just in case it needs it. I'll just do it up to 16. Be careful with messing with these cache values, because in any of your whenever you're doing simulations, don't push it up right up to the edge of what your computer can handle. I have 128 in here, so it can handle 16 no problem. Usually if I'm doing a sim, I'll set it to about half of my RAM, 64 if I want to have some cached frames and stuff like that. So, just be mindful of those things. Forces, I had played around with these settings before, and this was a lot of trial and error, but what I found was good for this type of a simulation was about in this range here, 0.75 and 0.5 for our two different friction thresholds. And then I upped this. I think I set that to 200 to get a bit more constraint iterations. And then the other thing I found really helped was these post-collision passes. They said to, in the kind of help bubble here, it says to do the number of stack layers plus 2 is a good estimate. So if you kind of look at how many stack layers you have here is kind of a good place to start with some of those things. So I'm just going to do 8, I believe is what I had before. So these both are going to be hits on performance. So just keep that in mind. Like, it's going to take a little longer to calculate. And the other thing I'm going to do is change this to quasi-static. You'll see that this is going to change a little bit here. It's going to say it's going to run through 10 frames. If you look down at the bottom here, if you can see, actually that's not showing up on there. It's interesting, but it's running through 10 of those frames. And because I messed up and wasn't thinking properly, they just fell down through the floor because I need a floor. This was something I did last time. I actually had geometry underneath it, so I didn't have that problem. But I'm going to put a ground position down here. I'm just going to click it on, and that'll be right at, world origin. So the ground plane will be right on the X and Z plane. And we'll see that settles, and we've got some, it kind of slumps the edge here just like that. And that makes sense for like a grain, sand, snow type simulation. And yeah, so I'm just going to see where we're at here, because we got a couple particles that kind of jumped up in the air. So I'm actually going to unset this real quick and just set this back to dynamic so we go back to where we were. And I just want to see what this looks like as this, settles down a little bit. See why there were particles flying up in the air. Interesting. It looks like one just kind of got shot out there. So I think instead of just doing 10 frames, I could probably do 20, and that'll get me to a pretty decent spot. So I'll just do 20 frames there. This shouldn't be too big of a hit on my overall calculation. It goes pretty quick here. I think it took about 10 seconds maybe to do 10 frames, so I'm guessing it'll be about 20 seconds to do 20 frames. So let me just up that a little bit just to give it a little more settling time. It's going to let it go through, like I said, that whole simulation and kind of get to, a nice rest pose, basically, rest point. Right. There we go. We've got kind of our rest position here. And what I can do is I can actually click this and clear the dynamics. That'll just make sure that there's not any like stray, velocities or things like that sitting in the system. And just to note, you can see the collision kind of plane that's happening here for the ground. It is an infinite ground object, so it won't at any point let it go through that plane, even over here where obviously it looks like it's hanging over the edge. It's just a visualization of the infinite plane that it's set up. So, yeah. Let's see here. What I'm going to do next is get this collider started here and start messing around with that a little bit. So we have our geometry here, but we need to get that into our simulation kind of chain here. Oop, I accidentally moved. I moved my timeline. And for some reason, I've noticed this, and if anybody has seen this before and has like wants to put this in a comment or in the chat or anything like that, and have seen why, when you have it in the quasi-static state, why when you move the timeline, it recalculates. I don't really understand that. It seems like it would be something that it would just always go from the start frame 20 frames out. I'm not sure what the situation is there or why that's the case, but if anybody has any reason for that, drop it in the comments, let people know. I mean, I'd love to know as well. So, like I said, I'm not by any chance or by any means an expert at this, but if you do have some thoughts on that, I'd love to know. So, so we've got our vellum or our geometry here. Let me just do one more little thing here. I'm actually going to do a vellum IO. And you can also connect these just by holding shift and clicking on all of them and clicking on the first, of these little dots in the next thing down. And what I'm going to do is just cache this out just so it doesn't recalculate it if I don't need it to. So I'm going to say vellum quasi, I'll just call it sim, maybe initialization, something like that. And I don't need a frame range. I'll just save the current frame. And I'm going to save this into the sim folder instead of geo. I like to put my simulation stuff in a sim folder. You can put it in your geo folder if you want to, no problem. But great, I'm just going to save that to disk. And once I'm loading that from disk, you get our little icon here now, which is nice. And now I should, without any issue, be able to scrub around here. The reason that that's happening is because it is actually still trying to evaluate this by frame range. So I'm just going to take that out, resave that to disk, and now we should be good. We'll only have that, reference once. Great. So I have this right here, and I am going to do my vellum solver again. I'm going to grab a vellum solver. Drop those in like that. And actually, there is no collision geometry coming through here, so I don't actually need that. I'm just going to cut that one wire and wire in this one here because that's going to be my collision geometry. And now if we look at this node, we can see that we have this, he's showing up as blue collision geometry, and he will actually start to drive, any collisions that are in this simulation. I'm also going to turn on the ground position, a couple of these little things that I set up before. Like I had 8 of those collision passes. I think I had 200 of this. I'm going to up these thresholds just a little bit. And what I've actually done before too is created a reference copy of one of these vellum solvers for the other. So like this one, I can just say like sim rest state like that. And then this is going to be snow sim. Just kind of clean things up so I know what's going on here and why I've got, my two different solvers here. So like I said, I'm going to put about 64 gigs for the cache, just if I need it. Not sure how high it'll go, but sometimes you can actually speed up your simulation, like previews and stuff like that, if you're not showing all like your collision guides and things like that. So in this case, I think we should be okay. I don't think it'll take too much extra time to visualize that, but sometimes that can take a little hit on memory, especially if you have like really complicated geometry or whatnot in your scene. So just keep that in mind when you're simulating anything really. Like sometimes your visualizations themselves can actually put a hit on your what seems like your performance. Like if you're just seeing it in the viewport and you're waiting, sometimes even just redrawing those visualizations can take up some time. So just obviously be mindful of that as well. So so we've got this snow sim that's kind of sort of ready to start seeing what's going on here. So let's just start that rolling and see kind of where that gets us. So hit play and see how our speed looks here. It's not bad. We're getting like 30 frames per minute, but it'll take a little bit of time here, and that's maybe a little bit more time than I would like for the simulation. And if you remember earlier, I was talking that we don't need to be simming these particles over here. He's never going to touch them. There's never going to be any influence on those. So instead of worrying about this whole area here, what I can do is just split this this geometry stream right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this character here, my Crag character. I'll just maybe template that, and I'm going to use another QLib node, which is bound over frame range. And this is really a nice node because what I can do is actually get, just like the name implies, the boundary of him over the entire frame. And this is, or the entire frame range. You can see here in the settings, it defaults to be the whole preview timeline. And I believe this is actually a how many frame increments it goes in as it goes through the animation and checks, kind of makes a bounding box, I believe, like every 8 frames in that case. Like I could probably set this to be like 24. Yeah. And it's actually going to change a little bit because now instead of it being, a frame, a bounding box every 8 frames, it's every 24. And so it might miss some of these over here where he swings his hammer around or things like that. So, if I change this to 8, you'll see that there's a lot more boxes inside of there now. But what I can do instead of worrying about this, and I was actually thinking about this when I was talking about the different named components of this Crag character, what I could actually do is take his hammer out of the calculation. So what I could do is do a blast, set this in here, and I can go to I believe it's under the primitives. If I find the name here, I can scroll down again to hammer and just take that right out, because really his hammer isn't a huge impact on where the actual area around him is. So now if I do these bounds, there's going to be some, there's going to be a couple moments where he, let me template this and look at this. There we go. There's going to be a couple moments where the hammer is outside of it, but that's easy. I can just adjust this bounding box a little bit there. But like here, still inside of the bounding box, he'll swing it outside of it. It's fine, but he's not going to be hitting any snow there. And then there it goes out, past, but we can, again, adjust this bounding box to kind of fit all of those elements inside of there. So we do actually have these padding values that we can add on here. So in the z-axis, we can add a little bit of padding like this, and that'll make sure that he stays, kind of inside of that bounding box like that. And then let's see how that looks over here. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Now what we could do as well is delete these channels here so that these aren't trying to mirror each other, and then we can fine tune them even a little bit more. So like, for example, that doesn't need to go so far back. We can have it a little bit smaller like that. Maybe, let's see, in the x-axis, just adjust that maybe just a little bit, and likewise maybe go like negative 0.2 on the other side because we don't need quite so much on that side. So now we've got kind of just this bounding area where he's going to be walking. You know, he swings his hammer there, all good. And then we can use that. So if we look at the same situation here, now we can see like what a small subset of these points are here. So like if you had this huge geometry, you know, say you had a big scene that you wanted to fill with snow or something like that, you know, you could take a small subset of it in this case and just split that off and just say, okay, the rest of this I know is kind of in a rest state. That's one of the benefits of kind of putting this system through a little bit of dynamics, is that it's kind of settled down and gotten to a point where it isn't going to really react in some drastic way to this part being active and this part being inactive and not part of the simulation. So what I can do now is just do a simple group node here, put this onto this this part of the this chain that's coming down. That's just, like I said, that's our geometry if we hover over that. And I'm going to use this bounding box here to drive this group. And I'm just going to call this just sim, I guess, is fine. We'll change this to points. And we can see obviously all the points are selected there. But when we say keep in bounding regions and change this to bounding object, it's going to take all of those that are, again, bounded inside of this this thing that we calculated over the entire time range. And in fact, I think I'm just going to make sure that we have just a little bit extra, you know, going down in the negative y-axis. So let me see here. So for lower padding, I'm just going to make sure there's just a little bit more there so everything is completely bounded. I think it is anyways, but just to give ourselves, to make sure it's good. So we have that, and then I'm just going to do a split here. I'm going to just change the order of those just to make the network look a little cleaner. I'm going to grab my point group sim, and I'm going to invert it because I want to split out whichever one you're selecting is coming out this first dot, and the second dot is whatever is not selected. So I just inverted it so that it, you know, it's matching up to those. So what I'm going to do is grab this dot and shift click onto this dot, hold down Alt, click again, and I got a merge node there. And so now I've got both of these two streams. One chunk of this in the middle is going through the snow simulation, and that is this chunk right here. And then the other chunk, which is this part right here, is not going through the snow simulation. So it's just completely static. And if we need to expand that, if we realize, oh, there's a lot of snow that did this, or like, oh, it really needs to get adjusted, like we can adjust that obviously and do a resim. But now what we're dealing with here is this has 890,000 points and this has 380,000. So we've effectively taken basically a third of our less than a third, maybe almost more like a quarter of our points, and put those into our simulation, and that should help it go significantly faster. So if we look at this and now start to simulate it, let's see what starts to happen here. Another issue arises. Unfortunately, these points here are all starting to scatter as they're starting to kind of do the same slumping behavior because there's nothing holding it on the edges. So we could add a collider in and all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, in that case, it's going to be a little bit of an expensive calculation because you have to calculate all those collisions and stuff like that. But what we could do instead is use one of the properties that is already found in a Vellum simulation, and that's the sleeping property. So if we go into our simulation here and look at sleeping, we can enable this auto sleep first of all, and that should set up a stopped parameter. Yep, it's right here. We can see that there's a stopped value. And what we can do as well is put down just a simple point wrangle. If you like Vex, or if you're a little nervous about Vex, it's not bad, and we're not going to do anything scary. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do I at stopped. So we're making an integer attribute right here called stopped, and I'm going to make that equal to 1. So now these points should all have the value of being stopped equals 1. So they should all be 1 in their stop value. So let's look at them under the geometry spreadsheet. We can see some things here that it sets automatically for us, is grain, mass, things like that. Let me just turn this node off and you'll see that there is no stopped parameter here. But when we turn this on, now we have them all stopped equals to 1. And let's go back to our scene view and back into our simulation down here. Oh, somehow I accidentally clicked on them and they all those nodes jumped around to each other. So let's just hit play here and see what we got. So now we have the stop behavior on all of these is set to 1. And if we look at the points, we should see that he's just moving right through them, and they're not even interacting with them because they're set to not interact with anything. They're all stopped. They're all asleep. They're not going to be reactive to anything. So then the question naturally next comes up is, how do we make sure that those are woken up when they need to? So let me just see if I can get this to not have that huge red check mark or that red flag there. Let me just go in here real quick and see what is causing that, because that is really annoying. There we go. That node was just causing that problem. Maybe not. Oh, sorry. What else is there? An error. There it is. Okay, perfect. Sometimes if you hit escape or something like that, you could get a flag in there and it just drives me crazy. So if you double click on this, it lets you jump into it. And then you can see that there's other grayed out levels here that you actually jump right past. So if you need to, if you want to find one of those and clear them out, you can just come in here and just click on it and it'll let you kind of visualize what it'll recook the network to that point. So that was all I did in that scenario. But anyway, so we have this snow simulation, and when I jump in, normally it takes you to this forces section. And what we can do is we can put in different forces that can work on our network, something like wind or, whatever different properties we might want to tweak. You can set a source to source new geometry into here. There's a bunch of different stuff that you could do in here, mostly with pop forces or pop, different pop nodes. But what we're going to do is we're going to find the awaken node, and I'm going to put it into this force part right here. And what this is, the reason, the kind of the way I think of it is like this force node happens as like a pre-solve condition. So like before it does the solving step, and usually the source is a post step. And so I wanted to wake it up before it does any simulation. So this pop awaken has a couple different options, and the one we're going to use this awaken by volume. So we need to set up a volume that tells us where this character is at in the world, and give it some sort of value to say, hey, wake these particles up, don't wake this particle up. So a pretty obvious notion for that would be to use something like a VDB. So we have our character here. Here's our character bounds, and we have our part of our network here. I'm just going to make sure this doesn't get too messy. And what I'm going to do next is I think I'm actually just going to shift this over like that. Bring these up. Okay, that's a little cleaner. I don't want it to be too messy and confusing here. So, so let's take this character geo and let's do a VDB from polygons and go into the first dot with that. That's kind of funny looking. He's very mushy looking. Let's just up our voxel size a little bit. Always be careful with these. Don't go too crazy, because sometimes you might like jump by like a factor of 10 or something, and then that's just way too much. So yeah, that's probably good. We can see some of the details of him. We don't need this to be like a super detailed it's not going to be a collision geometry. It's really just to say where is the surface of this character. And then we want to also do the world space units for him. And if we look at this here, So basically, here are all the active voxels around him, right? We can see that this voxel boundary, the bounds for this go out a bit further. But when we look back at this and highlight that, you can see just the active voxels. So that's what we want to play with. So let's change the exterior band to be like, I don't know, 0.25. It'll give us a little bit of room around him to be able to play with that, but not too much that, it's going to be an expensive calculation to make or anything like that. You can see here that it looks like this node is 824,000 voxels, which really anything below 1 million is pretty good. That's a little slower actually than I would like for it to be. I don't want it to have to take that much time to cancel. So let's bring this back up to 0.25, and we should be able to calculate that even a little bit faster. So yeah, that's a little bit better. So I mean, you can up this as far as you want. Like if it's really chugging on your computer, do what you need to be able to get your system in a good spot. This is about 10 frames per second, so we're in a pretty good position there. Maybe I'll just leave it at 0.3, and then that way we're kind of in a happy medium. So we've got our, I'm just going to call this calculate SDF. Now it's an SDF because we have our distance VDB that we're calculating here. It would be a different kind of VDB if we were using the fog setting here. That would give us density. And you could obviously do both of those at the same time, calculate them both out. But in this case, we just want the surface. And so we're going to use this distance here, this exterior band. That's how many. So it's calculating all the way out to from the surface 0.25 world units away. So that's kind of the way to think about this. And so I'm just going to put another null down here. So I have call this character SDF and put that on. I like to set little things like this that are kind of just in the middle of things as like a yellow, just to kind of make them a little more visually obvious. So we've got our SDF right here. Let's go into our snow sim, and actually, I don't want to have it set on that. Let's just change our display flag like that. All right, so let's grab that SOP path. Click the little icon here at the end for our selector, and I'm just going to close these up. There are, like I said, there's quite a few nodes inside of that chain, inside of that top sim, snow sim node that we made. So I'm just going to hide that, and we can see up here at the top, we've got our character SDF. I'm going to set this as a relative path just in case this was you ever moved this somewhere else. A relative path will just be looking, hey, go up this level, out, find a node called, char SDF, and use that for the volume that we're going to be using to wake these particles up. So we have that set, but what we want to do is change the volume threshold. So let's change that to be, 0.2. That's within that 0.25 space, but is less than the actual threshold, because if you set it right to the threshold, it has a hard time saying, everything is, saying when volume is less than 0.2. Well, it kind of everything is less than 0.2 because everything further away doesn't get any value. So it's kind of like you're right on that threshold. So you want to just pull it back just a little bit from that, and then it can still differentiate those values. So so that should be good. We've got that set. Let's jump back up, and let's actually look at just this. I'm just going to put down a null here so we can look at it, so we can see just this geometry coming out. And I want to visualize this attribute, the stopped attribute from this null right here. So I'm going to click I and just click on this stopped value right here. And now as we go through, hopefully we should see those starting to wake up, and sure enough we do. There they are. So we can see that these particles out here are all in the stopped parameter, and these ones are not. These ones are now awoken. So we can see that simulation is obviously running. So let me just turn this off right here. That's your simulation, or that's our visualization. And I'm also going to turn off the guide geometry or the collision. Yeah, we'll just turn that off. And then I can just visualize this character geometry here. It's a little quicker just to have a templated, standard geometry than something calculated in like a network like that. So okay, so we can see starting to now actually affect these particles, and they're doing what, you know, they're doing something. They might not be doing what we want them to be doing yet, but they're doing something for sure. So let's see what starts to happen here. It's actually looking kind of funny already because I'm seeing that it looks like these particles are kind of just falling down. It looks like they're just like, yeah, they're like jumping all over the place, like doing some really wacky stuff. And I did actually notice this last time I was actually working on this process at my day job, and that's kind of why I had put this out earlier in the week for the previous um, scheduled live stream for hey, what do you guys want to see? And this was one of the ideas. So I had this as something that I was working on, in my day job. And so I was like, I've gone through this process a couple times now, just like trying to figure out, hey, why are these values doing this? And this was one of the first things I came across was like, these particles are like so energetic. They're just bouncing all over the place, and they're just really not acting the way I wanted them to. And it was kind of a dual, a dual thing that helped fix it. One of them was kind of dialing in these friction thresholds here, static threshold and this dynamic scale. And the other thing was under the advanced tab here, under grain collision. And this is where you get this nice kind of wet, sticky kind of look with your grains. So if you're doing like a wet sand, or in this case snow, which again is similar in some cases to what sand would be, where sand is a particle that has a thin layer of water around it to kind of make this like dual thing, which sticky and wants to kind of move away from things but also be stuck together. So what I set this to was 0.5, but first I'm actually just going to set it all the way up to 1, just so you can kind of see what this does and how you can really kind of drive this attribute. So right now this stickiness is at 1, and you're going to see how intense you can kind of make this this value. So just noticing that some of these particles are actually stuck inside of his foot because they actually start inside of his foot. And so it's actually trying to kind of fix that problem and just say, oh, these are inside, so we're just going to keep them inside. So we can actually fix that up earlier here, and I probably should have had his collision geometry introduced a little earlier into this chain. So that was definitely a mistake on my part, but that's why we're seeing those particles be up inside of his feet like that. So I don't know what that's doing. Let me just reset this. I wonder if it just hit a weird little snag there because I stopped it. All right, let's take a look at this again here. It was really odd. I wonder if there's something strange going on with this SDF here, maybe? No, that all seems fine. Huh. I don't know what is happening there. Well, first of all, let me fix that issue with his foot collision there. Oop. So let's go back up to the top here, and I am going to drop this up in here, and I'm just going to let this recalculate, and now it should hopefully redo that that rest state with and the vellum, the grains, where it generates the grains. Hopefully it'll keep that all in check as it does this first calculation, and those won't be stuck inside of his feet. So we'll let this do its thing. And then in this case, since I have this this Vellum IO that's kind of creating a no, we still have those inside of them. Interesting. Um, what I could do just to fix that real quick, I'll just save this just since this is going to be a better version anyways. Um, what I could do is actually just remove him like that part of his feet that are intersecting with that uh, cube. I could just do a quick boolean of that, and that'll make sure that those aren't actually sourcing inside of his feet like that. So I'll just do that. So let's take a boolean, subtract, and really all we're going to do is take this snow geometry, put that into A, and then the character geometry into B. And then that can actually drive our grain generation. And now if we look at this, we should hopefully see that there is, oh, let me just look at my Boolean because my Boolean's probably not working yet. Do, it's B. Oh, okay. I think it's because this is a packed geometry. So let me just, yeah, that's probably why. So I will unpack that. And with a packed geometry, it just basically, yeah, there we go. It just means that it's all saved as like basically the geometry is all saved to one individual point. And that way it keeps some of the memory down lower, and you can do, like in that case, deformations a lot easier with, you're doing 67 packed geometries all packed to individual points, and then you just have the transforms for those points instead of having to deal with the transformation for all the points. It's just a way to kind of save on some of that stuff. You see that a lot in rigid body dynamics if you haven't seen that before. But anyways, so now we have this Boolean. Those are subtracted out from that, so we'll start with those not having particles inside of them. Now when we look at this grain node, there won't be particles there, so they won't be stuck inside of his feet like all crazy like that. And I'll just let this node run again real quick. Again, if you're joining us tonight on Houdini Hangout, or if you plan to join live in the future and are watching this just at a later date, would love to have you join us during any of these live sessions. This week is a little different because I had some technical problems on Tuesday, and so I just decided to redo that today on Thursday. But if you guys come to the live sessions and stuff like that, would love to hear from you. Love to hear from you in chat. If you have questions about what's going on, any comments about what's going on, if you have ideas for how to make this better, I'd love to hear those as well. Like I said, not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, just somebody who really enjoys doing visual effects work and making different sims and solving problems, 3D animation problems in Houdini, and just something I really enjoy doing. And so I've been doing this for about 5 years now, and so if you want to if you have any comments to add to the discussion, would love to hear them. So anyways, so right now we've created the grain constraint, and I clicked, yeah, see, that is one thing I really wish that this when you're in that quasi-static mode, that it wouldn't reset the simulation quite as often. You would think it would stay a little bit more more stable, but that's why we have this Vellum IO right here that'll it'll cache out our data for us. So just let it do its simulation again. Sorry for the boring couple seconds here. All right, there we go. I'm just going to resave this Vellum IO node, and we should be, hey, recooking one more time. Sorry about that, folks. Hopefully only take about 20 seconds. All right. Now it's looking good. Make sure that's saved to disk and all good. So now we don't have particles like where his feet were, so that we don't have him like walking around with particles in his feet. So that's a nice little addition here. So let's just double check all these nodes and make sure nothing weird is going on here. That's good. These are good. Let's just double check this SDF, make sure there's nothing weird happening here. Yeah, seems fine to me. All right, let's try this snow sim one more time. All right, let me turn on, just template that so we can see where our crag geometry is, and let's let that start to, you know what? I actually wonder if just setting this all the way up to 1 is freaking it out. Let me just set this to like 0.8, just so it's not all the way to 1. I wonder if we're just hitting like a weird computational thing there. So you'll notice when it sims in this high attraction weight mode, that is so bizarre. It's also really strange because these are getting shot off in like the distance over here. And then they're gone. Let me see if unpacking this, oh, put that in there too. Let me see if unpacking this geometry will get us in a better spot. I'm kind of curious about that. Nope. Wow, that is a weird one. So odd because it doesn't seem like there's anything happening here. That frame number. Let me just check and make sure like there's not like some like weird like jump in the point count or something. The number of points isn't changing. Um, let's see here. What could this be? Okay, let me do this. Let me just have all of these have this unpacked first. So that's one of the things there that it was yelling at me about was that since this is packed geometry going into this SDF, it's actually converting it all to quads and triangles on it in that node. So let's just see if this will help if we do that. Let me just see where that puts us. No polygons. There's no polygon soups or anything. All right, let's try that again. Oop. I've got all my point numbers on. Let's turn that off. That's a little distracting. Oh no, this is a weird one. That is a weird one. All right. Well, since our let's just do something, crazy here. Let's take this out and see if we end up with any problems in general with this, and we'll just let it go without any collision geometry and see if it's still a problem. Nope, that looks fine. Didn't explode or do anything crazy. All right. Well, at least we know it's At least we know it's something with our geometry. Let me just make sure I didn't set anything wrong in here. Awaken by volume, activation, volume threshold. Oh, let me just set this to 1. Let me just turn this down a little bit, see if that causes us to be in a better spot. The other thing I might try to do is maybe put this into the source output instead. I'm pretty sure I did it into there last time, but you know, you never know, I guess. Nope. All right, you know what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn on my visualizing here, turn on my collision, just so I can see if there's anything weird going on here. Let's see. Nope, those are all normal. All right, let's see if anything weird happens in this. No, there's nothing really out of the ordinary with those collision geometries. Look at this. So another thing I'm going to check is to make sure that there's not anything like weird happening with the values in, like, you know, like the UVs aren't jumping. Now, normally I would think, oh, maybe there's some velocity that's happening in there because things are getting pushed away and maybe it just something pops in the you know, the geometry and all these values go all over the place. But there's no velocity values on this, so that's not the case. We only have normals and UVs. I don't think anything extraordinary is going to be happening with the UVs. I wouldn't think normals probably are having anything really crazy happen to those. Um, Not even anything changing here. Let's go back here. Actually, let's look at those normals real quick. Let's see if anything out of the ordinary happens with these. Seems fine. I don't see anything like flipping or doing any weird orders of anything is happening. This is a strange one. This is a real strange one. All right. Well, let's try another thing. Let's do a VDB convert. And I am going to drop this down there and change it back to polygons. So we'll just have this skinny little, maybe not so skinny. We'll do a mushy version of Crag. Just kind of this weird version. And so at least in this case, we'll know that he should be, you know, airtight, I guess you want to say. He should be a solid object. Let's see what happens with this, just out of curiosity. It shouldn't be too long to calculate that because it's a super low resolution VDB. Let's just see what happens here. See if that makes it explode. Oh, well, that's wild. So I think it's something to do with him dragging these points. It's something to do with that, where it's like that is causing some real crazy issue where it's like the points can't get out of his way quick enough or something. Huh. Interesting. That's bizarre. All right. Let's do this. Let's go back. Take that out of there. And let's just Go back into our advanced tab. Let's turn the attraction weight off. Let's just see if we can see what we get here with this again, because I just want to make sure that, see if it's actually something in my attraction weight that's causing the issue. Because that might just be the problem, is that they're too stuck together and they're not able to actually get out of the way. Yeah, that's already seeming like that's going to be what the issue is. It's just that the attraction weight was too high. So what that might actually be doing is might be keeping them so locked together that they're not able to kind of avoid and get out of the way of, this geometry that's coming through. And so that could be what's making everything kind of just blow apart. And then, ultimately there's some crazy velocity or force that's getting put in there and it's just causing chaos in the solver. So me pushing that too hard clearly clearly was the problem. All right, let me just up this a little bit. See if we can get it to do something, because we want it to be a little sticky, but maybe not all the way sticky. Look at that. That is really really wild looking. So, oh, you know what I think the issue might actually be? Might be that he is actually going underneath, might be going below the ground plane at certain points, maybe. Or just that he's so close to it. Yeah, that might be the problem. All right, so new idea. Instead of keeping having the ground plane be right at the zero, the zero value there, I'm going to have the ground plane just a little bit below it, and see if that doesn't help us to not have all these crazy particles that are like getting kind of crunched together. So let's do that. It'll take a second, but we'll get there. All right. In fact, I needed to go back up here anyways because I wanted to put that grain collision 0.5 was where I liked that. That gives it a little bit of, you know, gives it that little bit of attraction at this earlier state here as well. And we can turn on the auto sleep so that when things settle down, it can actually solve a little quicker. So let's go back up here to this box. Let's just add one more transform since we know this is already right on the ground. Let's do a transform again. And just go down. Let's see. How far to go down? Maybe negative 0.2. Nope, that's way too far. Just 0.1 is probably enough. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's more than enough. And then I'll just add 0.1 back into the size of this. So we're, 0.13. I'll just do 0.24 just to even that out a little bit. Great. So we went down 1/10 there. And then what I can do as well is for this rest state, I can go under my forces, or sorry, under the solver and do the ground plane just at negative 0.1. And now if we do that, that is actually in the wrong spot. I'm just gonna go back to frame 1 here and let this run its quick rest, settle kind of step here. Interesting. That actually, pardon me, that actually took a little bit more time to run, probably because I turned on the attraction. So that is actually adding more time, to the entire solution. So it's just about done. Frame 21 is next up. Then we can save that out. Perfect. Okay, cool. Looks good. I'll save this here to disk, let it reload. There we go. In fact, it's interesting. These sides stayed a bit more tight together because of that adhesion factor. All right, so let's come down here. Now, all these things still will be, taken into account. It'll still split those out, still take these and make them stopped. So all of the things that we did downstream of that one change, this one adjustment up here will still all work and all kind of propagate through. There might be some things, obviously there's times when that happens, when you do something like that where that won't happen, but in this case, we should be good. So let me take this snow sim and do the same thing here with the ground position, set it to negative 0.1 just to give it a little extra room underneath this hammer here so it's not dragging directly on the ground, and see if this does it for us. Let's let that run. It from behind like this so we can actually see what's happening here. All right, I think we're in business here, guys. I think we're looking good. I shouldn't have said that because now in the next like 5 frames it's gonna freak out. All right. Well, it is doing what I was hoping it would do, so that's good. Now we just need to actually work on the look of it. So, um, yeah, it's looking pretty good. Maybe still a little not sticky enough. So I'm going to up that just a little bit to the advanced tab. I'm going to up the attraction weight to 0.5 like I had before. And we'll go back to the beginning here. All right, so let's let this do its thing and see where we get with it. Oh, you know what I'm going to do as well? Because I think I actually I don't have this kind of coming out as far as I would. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Human Element. Yeah, it's starting to come together pretty well here. I had a little problem before there. Yeah, actually, because I set these attributes back down so far, I'm going to give it just a little bit more. So I'm going to go back in here into the pop awaken and just make sure that I'll give this another 1/10 of a meter. And now we should have a little bit more particles here waking up around these objects. And I am going to also up this just a little bit on the sleep delay. I don't want it to go back to sleep so quick. So we'll do that. All right, let's take a look at what this looks like here. I'm going to turn this off again and let this roll through. See where it gets us. Yeah, and like I had said before, if anybody has any suggestions or any thoughts about what different things to do differently, different ways to go about things, different ways to look at it, I'd love to hear it. Please drop it in the chat, either on YouTube or Twitch. If you're in those two places, I am also on Twitter as well. But I don't think there's a chat there. So if you're interested in commenting, those are the two places to find the a way to kind of respond back. But yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody if they have any thoughts, or like, hey, this would be an improved process or an improved way to do it. Oh, what does the Pop Awaken node do? Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, if you weren't watching from the very beginning, you might have missed that. But what I have here is, since I'm splitting this these particles here, I'm taking this entire group of vellum grains that have kind of just gone through a quick rest, kind of settling, simulation, and I took that and split it off into two different groups just to kind of, inside of this bounding box, just to reduce the number of particles that are going to go through the entire simulation. And in that stage here, I split one off to the left here. That becomes this kind of outer area. And really the kind of thought there is like, if you have a larger, vista of, sand or snow or something like that, you might want it to go into the distance a little bit. This would be a way to just kind of separate those two things out. And in this step here, I'm just literally setting them all to stopped so that this edge here isn't going to have an issue of falling down, when I start the sim back up. So it's not going to, because those are all stopped, it's not going to be simming or doing anything like that. And then when you take your Pop Awaken node, here it's looking at a volume. It's looking at a VDB or something of that nature, that you can, set to say SDF mode. And then depending on the threshold of the values that are in that volume, it'll wake the particles up. So in this case, I set up a SDF up here that's just calculating, obviously the surface position of him and then distance away, inside and out. I set the exterior band voxels to be 0.25 in world space, and that obviously calculates 0.25 meters away from the surface. And then inside of the snow simulate node here with the Pop Awaken, I'm looking at 0.2 in the away. Just if it's less than 0.2, then it'll wake those particles back up. So that's what you're seeing in this visualization. This visualization down here that I was doing was basically showing, when the attributes are stopped or not. So it starts here, it wakes those particles up and starts doing the simulation there. And then I also have the auto sleep on as well, so that as they kind of trail away from the back of the simulation, you can see it start to happen here a little bit. As they're static at the end, they'll start to go back to sleep so that they won't, keep being calculated basically, or being actively calculated. They'll go back into basically like a stopped rest, static pose. You can also, with a Pop Awaken, which is kind of neat. You can awaken by nearby particles. So with that, it's actually calculating, when there's a moving particle nearby that's awoken, and you can have those particles that are near the particle awaken. But then if that can get a little crazy, obviously you could see how that could start to spiral kind of into a weird mode where like, oh, now we've got these particles are waking up and then they hit these particles and they wake up. So you got to be a little careful with that and set the thresholds right. In this case, I don't really think that would happen, but I did use that before with like a snowboarding simulation thing that I was doing that's sort of similar to this. It was with the older grain setup, but I'm pretty sure I did it with that because it was getting pushed a lot. And so like if it pushed in a certain way, like if he carved into it, I'd want that snow to not just hit this like static lump of snow. So then when that active stuff hits the static particles, it actually transfers that, awakened state into that, and then you can get that velocity. So yeah, it's a cool node for especially like a grain simulation like this, with Pop, with using your Pop forces and stuff like that. So yeah, that's what it does. It's a cool little node to help out with this. So um, yeah, so I'm gonna let this just kind of go and see where it gets to at the end. I'm curious what happens with his hammer at the end here. So I should be. Yeah, no problem, no problem. Glad to explain it for you. Yeah, as always, if anybody has any questions, please drop them in chat. I'd love to at least do my best to explain them. And I might be a little bit off, but that's always what the help cards are. If you do end up missing, if I miss one little thing in the whole explanation, you can always find a lot of good stuff in their help cards. That's where most of anything I've learned has come from, probably. All right, let's take a look at what this guy's doing down here. Yeah, this is looking pretty good. He sets it down and then he grabs it, swings it if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so in my day job, I'm doing a thing with a little with like a dog out in the snow, basically. So I was playing around with taking. I actually was able to find some dog mocap. Used Kinefx to attach that to a really crummy dog model because I'm not like a character model or anything like that, and I had this dog motion capture moving around. I was playing with some fur because we want to do it like, do some stuff with that. And then I was also working with the snow that he'd be walking through, and that was sort of where some of these concepts have come from. And so for that, it was I was able to do a pretty, obviously I'm not, it was a little bit higher fidelity simulation, but it turned out to be pretty neat. And I was like, oh, this is a cool thing. I think it'd be cool for people to see it. So, yeah, I think it was a pretty fun thing. Now, look at that. I got some. I was a little over ambitious with my clipping the boundary here, because like if we merge these back together, you'll see that there's like some weird line there now, but that's pretty easily taken care of by just. I mean, obviously, I would go back and resim it, but um, not a huge deal for this situation that we're looking at here. But what I would pretty much do is just give it a little extra boundary there, just so that it isn't going to hit the edge quite so, and spill over like that. Because obviously, when these awoke, they fell over the edge. So you do want to be careful if you're using that method, just to be able to not have them, not have that happen, basically, where the edges kind of go crazy. Huh. Interesting. I was expecting that to be a lot bigger, but I guess it makes sense. I live in the Northeast, so we've had a lot of. Oh, that's weird looking. Guess I've never seen someone slam a hammer into a into a pile of snow, so I don't really have a good reference for that. But I live in the Northeast and have done a lot of shoveling recently, so. Yeah, I can't say I've seen anyone slam a hammer like Mjolnir into a into a big pile of snow. So it's kind of, I guess, don't have a lot of good mental reference for this. All right. Well, that looks like we're getting a pretty good sim here. Let me play this back and see. Yeah, it's actually probably too sticky. It looks like it's like sucking back onto his feet. It's like almost. Yeah, right. It's the nor'easter. I know they're talking about more snow maybe, but also it's going to be like 40 where I live like tomorrow. So who knows, what's happening, but yes. Ugh. Yeah, well, actually I do I live in a at the end of one of the I actually live in Buffalo, which is we get all lake effect snow, and it sometimes is actually pretty wet. You'd be surprised. But yeah, it's it's crazy stuff. Yeah, this yeah, for sure. If it was if it was dry snow, it would blow away. So, all right. So that stickiness is all being driven by this attraction weight here. So let's dial this down a little bit. Let's go back to like 0.35 and see where that puts us. I'm going to let this sim in the background. I'm going to take a quick break because I need a cup of coffee or something to loosen up my vocal cords a little bit here, but I'm going to let this sim in while I'm going to do that. And I'll take a quick break here, probably about 10 minutes roughly. I'll do a little break here for some coffee, and I will be back. Thanks, Human Element, for joining me tonight, and for anybody else that might be joining. And yeah, I'll be back in a little bit. Thanks. All right, we are back. I've got myself a beverage, and yeah, let's see what Craig was up to while we were away. So I did sim this out, and I'm just going to play it back real quick. It's not playing back real time, but you can get kind of a sense of what it's doing here. It did lower the attraction weight even a little bit more than I had originally, and I think that there's probably one of the forces in the main solver that would adjust some of these like impact forces and things like that you're seeing. Um, but I think for the sake of of explanation, I think it's in a pretty good spot. Um, it's got kind of a nice sort of sticky feel to it. It's not overly it's not doing anything too crazy. Um, but yeah, you could obviously go up or down with that attraction weight and kind of dial in some different looks. Like we were saying, if you wanted a real dusty kind of look, you could do that. Now, obviously, here we've got some stuff popping up after it slams down, which is kind of a nice little thing. The other thing that would probably help with some of these is to add some sub steps in. I was kind of just doing it at one sub step just so that it would solve a little quicker. But it'd be something you might want to add in if you were replicating this. So I'm just going to take that out and look back here, the snow sim. And then what I'm going to do, just so that I don't have to worry about resimming this, is do another Vellum IO and just drop that down here at the end. We'll call this Snow Sim. Now, if you've noticed any of the newer updates, the file caching in Houdini 19 is amazing. Unfortunately, that hasn't made its way into this multi-path saving setup yet, but I'm guessing that that'll be coming pretty soon because it is so nice to have like it build all your file names and stuff for you. If you haven't used the regular file cache node yet, it is just it's a delight to use now. It's just so much easier. You get versioning with it, and if you have side effects labs loaded up, you can even get a labs version that has wedging built right into it for doing multiple outputs from your multiple attribute changes for your sims and all sorts of stuff. Really great. But anyways, fortunately this one doesn't have it yet, but I'll just do a couple quick tweaks here to get us kind of where I like it. I'm going to do F3 just so that it has the leading zeros in it. Put it in the sim folder, and yeah, that should be good. I'm just going to save this out. I don't think this should take too long. Let me just do this and let it save through. Yeah, that didn't seem to take too long. Seems like it's seems like the say there we go. Wow, that was crazy quick. Right. So now those are all saved out. I don't have to worry about those accidentally resimming or anything like that while I'm or losing my cache while I'm on my way down this next few steps here. But what the next thing that I started playing around with in this look at that, some of it still he stomps so much it came right back into his toe. It's like I definitely should have had the sub steps up higher because it would stop a lot of that stuff from happening. But anyways, so what I did previously when I was working on this was use a point replicate after this to just kind of add a bunch more points into it to give it a more interesting look, kind of after the fact. So you could do it a couple different ways here. So I'll put this down here, and this will be all of our geometry here. I did, in fact, adjust this so that it didn't knock this whole thing over. It does knock a few pieces down here, but I think in practice you would barely see that, if at all. So, those points do actually fall below this level, but unless you're really looking at that, you probably aren't going to see that. So like just here's our bigger snow world or whatever. And so what I did was I did a point replicate. Let that run for a second now. Well, this is at 100, so that's going to be a lot of points. Give it a second. Obviously be very careful with this. You don't want to just jump right to a little bit too much. Yeah, we got 243 million points. I think we're a little high there. So let's set this to 10 per. And the reason I like this is because it gives you this kind of, broken up. I don't know if you'll see this, if the compression on the stream will like this or not, but it'll start to help break up it from being just big spheres, obviously big balls of snow, basically. And what we can do as well is add in, noise and things like that, so that it's not going to just be, these little, so that it has something going on there. Now, I'm actually just thinking about this as I'm saying it out loud. I'm realizing that I saw some noise in one of my simulations that I was working on today, similarly at work, and I was like, and I'm just thinking, oh, the noise is actually changing. It has to have some sort of temporal element to it, and so it was actually causing noise in my the volume step that I'll show you next. So that actually probably isn't the best thing to do now that I'm thinking of it. So I changed this to sphere usually, and I up the scale on these. I'm not sure if I went all the way to 2 or if I just went up to 1.5. Don't remember. Could probably do like 1.75. That's probably fine. Yeah. Let's do 2. Let's just call it 2 and be good. So the reason I kind of like doing this is that it helps to sort of break up the look of, just it being this one gigantic, sphere or whatever, and helps to kind of give it more of a textured look, I feel like. So, you don't have to do this. You could go for a more stylized look and just have individual, you could up the scale, the scale of the original sim, the point separation of it, and go from there. There's a bunch of different things that you obviously could do with this. And if you have another idea, love to hear it, but this is kind of an interesting way to break it up from, just from something like this, where maybe we have, just all these individual points, to then breaking it up like this, where we have, multiplied points off of it. And this is 10. I mean, you could probably go up to 20 on these and be okay. Obviously your viewport's going to slow down a bit. I always am a little like, hey, cautious with this because I have a decent graphics card in my computer. So, your computer might be a lot more angry with you when you do this stuff. I mean, there is 36 million particles here. So, I mean, just take it with a grain of salt or a grain of snow. Sorry, that's terrible. Anyways, so this is kind of like what I like to do in these kind of things to break it up a little bit. And then I feel like to get a really nice look, with these particles, I really like the method of using like a volume to do the rendering of it. I think it's just a nice look. I think it gives it like, it feels a little bit more faithfully like the way snow would be, like a really high density volume. Just the particles never really feel right to me. I think maybe a combination of the two might be something that would be helpful as well. Like maybe that would be a good way to look at it. Like you do the actual points and then the volume as well, built from, this kind of, these replicated points. But anyways, so here's the point replicate. And then I'm going to, so I was thinking about a way to visualize, these points here to see what their point scale looks like. So if I come back up here to where these are created, up at this step here, I know that has a P scale. I'm trying to think if there's a spot where it. Oh, stop. So let's look at the P scale up here. So I'm going to look at the geometry spreadsheet and just see what these P scales are. They're 0.01. I guess that makes sense. If no, yeah, I guess that makes sense. 0.01. Okay, so I think at this point they don't have a P scale anymore. They do not. Oh, they do here. Sorry, but once they get down to this point replicate, they don't have a P scale anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a attribute adjust float, which is already set to P scale, which is always a nice little thing there. So this is set right here. And I'm just going to do a set initial. I'm going to do random, and I'm going to do it by, let's do middle and range length. So the middle value will do 0.005, which is like half of the value that it was at before. And then let's do 0.005 again here. And then that'll give it, well, let's do that a little less, sorry. Like 2.5. So that'll add 0.0025 on the upper end of it, and 0.25 it'll take off from that middle value. So and you can do some stuff here with the value distribution. You can do outliers and do some remapping and stuff like that, but we don't have to worry too much about that right here. So great. So we've got these particles, and there's actually in the AE lib library, which is right here, AE lib, there's some, this is by, I think it's from one of the guys from Man vs. Machine. If you haven't seen their work, I mean, I don't know how you haven't, but you probably have seen it. You just might not know their name. But one of their heads of their 3D, I think, put out this, and it is super, super helpful little library of things. But they have this really nice point preview. And I think if I wire this in here, I should be able to get a look at this. Hopefully it won't freak out too much. Okay, there we go. I mean, it's a fast point preview. I probably can't tumble in the viewport because it's kind of freak out. But we can see that those particles are looking pretty good. Maybe if I set this to sphere, will that like me anymore? Maybe even be more angry at me. Sorry if my video's stuttering while I'm doing this. Looks like we're okay. Yeah, it's not gonna like that. And we're white. Oh boy. That happens to the best of us. Just gonna spam the escape key for a second here. See if we get out of this. I feel like every time I go to show somebody something at my office, like I call somebody over to my desk and like, hey, come take a look at this thing that I'm working on or whatever. Inevitably, I get to this white screen of the program freaking out and not wanting to do anything I wanted to do. And it always makes me laugh because I'm like, didn't do this for like 6 hours straight. And then I show you one thing and it's like, I'm going to use up all your memory and just totally freak your computer out. But hey, there we go. Thank you, escape key. Thank you, coffee. Let's go back up one step here. Spam it a little more. All right, I'm going to set this to manual for a second just so it doesn't update. And yeah, I guess we can just use that to look at it real quick again. Set this back to auto. All right, so we can at least sort of see what's happening here. I shouldn't be tumbling. I'm going to just let it go, let it do its thing. But the point sizes are looking fine. They've got like a nice little variation to them. Maybe they could be a little smaller, but they should be okay. Not the worst. So, all right. At least I know kind of what size they are. In a perfect world, what I should have done is probably like done something like, let's actually do this real quick because this is actually way smarter. I'm just going to cut a little piece of it off, blast it, delete not selected. And now I'm going to P-scale preview that. Let's see if this is any faster. Oh yeah, probably like 1,000,000 times faster. That's a little smarter to do. So now we can actually see what these points are doing. Yeah. Just playing with this multiplication of the P-scales here to see what it looks like. No, I think probably about at 1 is fine. That'll be fine. There'll be some overlap on them then, and it'll feel a little bit more random and stuff. Okay, cool. Back to that. And then the next step is to put down a VDB from particles. I'm going to make sure this starts off nice and big, so I don't do something crazy like crash my computer. And again, you can see that nothing, there's 0 voxels here because the real trick with doing something like this is that you have to kind of work with your P-scale values and your the voxel size, because if it's not within, the minimum radius here in voxels is 1.5. So if your point scale doesn't match up to 1.5 voxels, it won't create anything. So, here you can see particle footprint. You can do spherical or velocity trail. We'll just leave it at spherical because that's the quickest to compute, and we'll change this over to density. And all right, so I'm pretty confident that I can add a 0 in here without freaking anything out too much. It's not going to do much of anything yet. Let me up this point radius scale just to see if that'll get me anything. No, not yet. We're still a little too far. All right, so I'm going to do this to 0.5. Nothing. All right, let's do... I'm just going to slowly work through these because I don't want to make any huge jumps. And oh, okay, there we go. Now we're starting to get some volume. Great. So, yep, 47 million voxels in that. Quite a bit. But let's see. I'm going to do just put down one of these pyro bake volumes because it's kind of a nice way to just get some visualization going of it. We'll let that run. I'm just going to really crank the density on this to 50. Yeah, I could probably, so it's not picking up all of the, all of these particles quite the way I would hope it would. So I'm going to go back up to this VDB from particles and just set this to like maybe this to 1.5 and see where that gets us. Just kind of want those holes to be a little more filled in. Yep, and we're getting there. So let's actually back this off. I think we have too many voxels. I'm scared to tumble right now. Okay. Yep, that's probably a little better. There we go. All right, that's looking more like kind of what I would hope for it to look like, is something's more snowy. Yeah, so it's kind of a measure of playing around with some of these different attributes. So like maybe in this case, you'd want to set your middle value to be 0.75 or something like that. Just so it, you can, so they're a little bit larger in scale. The other thing too is if you want your snow to be much more, a lot more smooth on the top. I talked about it earlier, but you can also, like, up here when you first start this, you could turn off the dither surface, and that'll create like this perfectly flat sheet. You could also up the jitter scale a bit. You could turn off the dither and do the jitter scale, and that'll kind of give you some more randomness with like a really flat surface. So that could maybe work for you. There's a bunch of different ways you could start with this, but that kind of gives you a good sense of what, kind of what this can look like. And obviously I would tweak this a little bit. Like the shadow density is way too high, so I'd pull that back quite a bit. maybe 0.25 there. Yeah, maybe that's too much. Maybe 3.5. But yeah, so like in this case here, we're getting, yeah, I agree. I think it gets a pretty cool look. I mean, obviously this is super heavy. So like you would need to bake it out and do stuff like that. I mean, this is a lot of voxels here. So, you've got to be kind of careful with this, and you got to be smart about how you're starting to work with it. One thing I noticed while I was doing stuff today was that the smartest thing to do is if you have these kind of parts of the simulation that are static, just to calculate this kind of line here, the point replicate, p scale, and making a VDB on two separate, here I'll show you what that looks like. So you separate this out, throw this up here. This is going to operate just on these outside particles here, and it'll do its thing. Let's see here, like that. And then if we put this down, yeah, it's obviously still particles in the middle, but so that'll do the outside part, and it only has to calculate this once. Basically, it does this chain once. You see this side has the time, the stopwatch kind of looking thing on it. So I'm going to delete this merge out of here real quick. And then if you take this same stack here and just go to actions and create a reference copy, then you can have a matched version of that that's going to be on the other, this other parallel path that we're going to set up here. And this should actually even calculate quite a bit quicker because you're doing a subset of the points, obviously. But this one then will be the only one that has to calculate basically every frame. And what I did then was just do a VDB combine. There. And then that'll combine them together. Oh, actually, you got to set this up right. So we got the VDB combine, and normally what it's set to is just the operation is copy A. So it's literally just taking A and copying it. And we're combining A and B pairs, which means that we're looking at density on one side, density on the other side, and combining them. We're also resampling. We don't really need to do that because we know that they're going to be the same. So you can turn that off. It doesn't need to resample anything. In fact, that might actually, thinking of that just real quick, might speed up the calculation that I was doing earlier. So, but the operation is the one that we want to do. And so what we can do is we could add them together like this, and you'll see what that looks like in a second. There you go. So you could add them together like that. Now with some of the stuff I was working with earlier, I actually came up that ended up causing an issue on some of the borders between them. And in fact, you might kind of be able to see it a little bit in here. It depends. But what I found was the best one to do was to do maximum. So maximum was really good because if there's any overlap on the volumes, it won't try to add those values together. It'll just take the maximum value, which if you're putting a value of 1 on top of a value of 1, obviously it would come out as 2. But if you have it set to maximum, it'll still just stay as 1. So, any seams like that, if there's something that's like a little bit overlapping, you won't have like a higher density section right there. So, yeah, this is, I think, a pretty cool technique to kind of work with this. I'm going to try just pulling this down just a little bit more. And so if I want to change the voxel size, I change it just on the one that's not the reference copy here, and that'll change it for both sides. So here I can do this, and I'll just try it up a little bit more to like 0.6 just to see if we still get anything there. Yeah, that's actually getting actually almost be able to tumble around in it. So, I mean, it's, you play around with these values and stuff like that. It's kind of, this is, you don't want to make huge leaps in values, but yeah, that's actually starting to, I think, get in a good spot. It's not too too insane. And if we come down here, it actually should tumble even a little bit nicer. Yeah, so I'm getting almost 10 frames a second on the tumbling there. And yeah, you got some nice, kind of these trails obviously stay nicely because we've got that stickiness to the snow, that attraction, or to the particles. And when you render this, if you were using something like, say Karma or Mantra or something like that just built in, the nice thing about having this pyro bake volume is that it's going to have this material assigned to it, and it's going to look basically like that. And you can turn on your so for the final snow, I actually will have something coming out pretty soon that I'm doing at work with the snowboarder, and I can post that on Twitter to show what it looks like. For that scenario, when we did literally a snowboarder coming down a whole hill, and for that I did the VDB as the final rendering. You could, like, as I'm talking through some of these things, I'm thinking like, I wonder what it would look like to do a combination of the grains and the VDB, because that's kind of, I don't know. Snow is a weird thing because there's so much scattering through it. There's so much light that kind of gets in there and bounces around. It doesn't shadow so much. It's like, it's water or whatnot, obviously frozen water, it's ice. So, so I think the volume really works well with that scattering, but unfortunately then I feel like you miss out on some of the specular highlights and things like that. I'm pretty I can't remember what renderer I've seen that they can do. It might be Mantra that has, like, you can do some specular on a volume, I want to say, and that would be like the ultimate, because you want to have that like specular highlight with with the diffusion kind of through it. You could try doing the grains with like something like Subsurface on, but obviously that's a huge calculation, right? So the VDB calculation we're using Arnold. I don't know what renderer have you used before. I'm just out of curiosity. I mean, if you've used, stuff in Houdini or Arnold or Redshift, it kind of depends on how your renderer handles those things. I feel like Redshift, yeah. So this would be pretty tricky with Redshift, I would say. Because you've got so many voxels, right? I mean, that's gonna really, really kill, loading that all into memory, right? Yeah, Houdini Redshift. Yeah, I love personally, like, so we use Arnold at work, and I love the look of Arnold. I think it has like the one of the higher quality like looks to a renderer, but its interface in Houdini is I don't think up to par. I mean, they use like the render view thing, but yeah, I'll just throw it in there real quick anyways. Why not, right? We're all just chatting and talking. So let me just put some Arnold stuff in here real quick. But yeah, so I have Arnold and Redshift on here, but Arnold I think will be able to handle it a little bit better. So Arnold, there we go. And yeah, so I think Redshift would have a hard time with this, just strictly from the standpoint of trying to load this all into your graphics card, right? That's going to be tricky. And so I would say something like probably Mantra or Karma would be a good thing to look at. Like, honestly, the XPU for Karma is so insanely fast. I'm super excited to see like where that goes for Houdini, because like the volume, I did a volume render on my like personal channel that I put out there, was like some explosion stuff, and it was so fast. It was ridiculously fast. It was like 20 seconds a frame or something, and it was just this gigantic explosion. It was nuts. But it was, seconds to what would be like minutes in another render or whatever. But yeah, it was it's, I think that's a really interesting thing to see, kind of like where that gets to. But um, for now, calm down. My Adobe's freaking out on me. Um, so all right, we got a camera in here. We got that. Yeah. So Arnold, their render. Oh, I gotta throw this material on here. I'm being so sloppy with this, so please forgive me. I'm literally naming nothing. Um, all right, let's see if this does anything. If I see what I forgot. Oh, a light. Yeah, that would help. Yeah, let me just do like a distant light or something. Okay, okay. Everybody calm down. Light. I need a light. Just give me a distant one. Distant light will be fine. There we go. All right, let's go back to the camera. Great. Yeah, light would be an important part of the scene. Oh, right, right. So I had this happen before. I forgot that it has the the pyro big volume shader on there. It doesn't obviously like that. That'll override the node. All right. Let's see where this gets us. Need some more brightness on that. Go away. Yeah, see, this is your interface with Arnold in here, and it certainly is not. I don't think it's the best, but whatever. But it can handle this volume, which is pretty decent. That it can just go in here and kind of go crazy with it. But yeah. So the other thing I need to do here is give it a little bit of volume, ray depth, because it doesn't have any right now. So let me give it a little bit of that. And actually, probably I could pull down the volume. Let's try 25. See where that gets us. Probably was just too dense. Yeah. So this is starting to get somewhere where you'd want it to be more so. Obviously you can adjust how how dense it is, but it's tricky because this is just a huge lift as far as like for our rendering and stuff like that. We were had these huge VDBs that you're loading and have to set out to all your render, if you have multiple render machines or whatever, like in the case that we had. But yeah, so you can see, the sort of look that you get from it. Obviously, like I was saying with the flat surface, if you started with a flatter surface, obviously you wouldn't have as much, random, kind of look to the top of it like that. The other thing you do a lot of time, I'll do, I just didn't in this scenario, just for simplicity's sake, is if you do the particle footprint as velocity trail, when they're flying through the air, it'll actually, when there's any velocity on your particles, it'll actually like stretch them out and stuff like that. So something to keep in mind as well. I think you actually though might need to apply the velocity. Oh no, it does actually put the velocity in right there, so you're okay with that. Unfortunately, it strips a lot of the attributes, but you can copy them right here. I just didn't. So I mean, I guess if you do that, then you're gonna get a ton of. Let me just stop this real quick here. If you do that, then you're gonna get all of your, all your different. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah. Arnold is really good with volumes, so that was why we went with that scenario. In something like Redshift, I might maybe just not do that that particle replicate thing, and maybe just do like a soft volume around the particle, maybe just less particles, a bit softer volume, just to like soften up the edge of that, and then do like a particle with with the volume kind of acting as like a softening, like feathering thing, because that's the hardest part, is like you want it to not be this like hard line, right? So But yeah, it turned out really cool. And like I said, I'll end up posting on reposting, on Twitter when we come out with the scene. It's actually rendering tonight, honestly, which is kind of funny. But we've been working on it for like way too long. Right when the pandemic started, we were like close to being done, and then over the past whatever 2 years now, we've been like going back and forth with it, just like a side project thing we were screwing around with. But it was like, and it's snow based, so we don't want to put it out in like July. It makes no sense. So, anyways. But yeah, I think the end result is pretty good, and you get a nice look from it. And yeah, you can kind of play around with however, the density at that point, maybe the particles are in there. There's a lot of different options at that point. And you know, but you get the nice scattering and all that stuff. So yeah, so that's kind of the idea of this little snow effect here. So yeah, I think pretty much that's gonna wrap it up for me tonight. Really appreciate you guys chatting in the in the chat. Sorry, I'm good at words. But yeah, I really appreciate hearing from you guys. And next week I'll be doing this stream on Tuesday again. Hopefully we won't have internet issues again. Fingers crossed. Like I said, I updated some stuff in my apartment. So yeah. But that's it for tonight. Thanks so much for joining me. And yeah, look forward to seeing you guys next week. I might put another poll up just to get an idea of like, what you guys are interested in learning about and messing around with. So thanks for joining. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.